This from Truth Social from Donald J. Trump. The radical left Democrats and their leader, crying Chuck Schumer, have made it very clear where they stand, and that is on the side of criminal illegal aliens and not the American people. They are refusing to fund immigration enforcement unless Republicans agree to their open border policies, which will never, ever happen. They almost destroyed our country, allowing 25 million people to enter from prisons, mental institutions, and insane asylums. Those that are drug dealers and thousands of murderers, many of whom who have killed more than one person, because the Democrats have recklessly created a true national crisis. I am using my authority under the law to protect our great country. And as I will always do. Therefore, I am going to sign an order instructing the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mark Wayne Mullen, to immediately pay our TSA agents in order to address this emergency situation and to quickly stop the Democrat chaos at the airports. It is not an easy thing to do, but I am going to do it. I want to thank the hardworking TSA agents and also ICE for the incredible help they have given us at the airports. I will not allow the radical left Democrats to hold our country hostage any longer. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump. Wow. Good morning. My name is Willie Lawson, and welcome to the Morning Report. There's a moment, maybe you've had it yourself, where you're watching the news, listening to arguments, hearing the same talking points recycled over and over again, and you just stop and think, nothing is actually happening. Not really. People are talking, people are debating, people are positioning, but nothing's moving. And when that feeling sets in, it's not just frustration, it's something deeper than that. It's a sense that the system, this thing that's supposed to function, supposed to respond, and supposed to act when things get off track, isn't doing what it's supposed to do. And that's where a lot of Americans have been sitting. Not angry all the time, not even surprised anymore, really. Just tired of waiting. So when something finally does happen, when someone finally steps in and says, "We're done waiting," it it lands differently. So what you're seeing right now with the president, Donald Trump, and what we really need to do is understand it. You have to step back from the noise and look at the moment we're in just before this. Okay. So for months, the conversation has been the same. We need action, we need policy, we need solutions. And what do we get? We got more debate. Remember the SAVE Act gets talked about, get pushed forward, held up, negotiated, slowed down, changed. You got a Republican-led Senate, and somehow the result still feels like nothing. Now, people can argue about why. They can point fingers, explain procedures, talk about margins and rules and strategy and all that crap. But the average person isn't living inside Senate procedure. They're looking at it from the outside, out here where we are. And what they see is simple. You told us that you'd handle it, and it's still not handled. That gap, that space between promise and result, is where trust starts to slip. And at some point, waiting stops. Being patient and starts becoming a problem. You can only tell people, give me some more time, so many times before they start asking whether time is actually fixing anything. And that's the point where something has to give. Either the system catches up or someone moves around. And that's the moment we hit. Now, you can call it bold, you can call it aggressive, you can call it political, but what you can't call it is passive. Because what just happened is simple at its core. a decision was made to act instead of to wait. And that's a different kind of leadership, not the kind of leadership that asks for permission, not the kind that builds consensus over months, but the kind that says, we already have the authority. We're going to use it. And that's what separates this moment from all the ones that came before. There's something else here that people feel, even when you don't put it into words. For a long time, enforcement, especially around immigration, has felt distant. Something happened at the border, something happening in another state, something happening somewhere else. But now you're talking about airports, places where regular everyday Americans go, places where there are no shortcuts, no debates, no exceptions. You stand in line, you go through security, you follow the rules. Everybody does. So when enforcement shows up there, when it becomes visible in a place people actually experience, that, my friend, changes everything. Because now it's not abstract, it's real. Here's the truth, or one of the many truths. Most people don't read legislation. They don't. They don't follow the procedural votes. They don't track amendments or committee hearings. What they do is this: they notice when something changes in their world, when the process feels different, when the environment feels different, when the presence of authority feels different. That's what sticks. That's what makes people say, all right, something is happening. And for a lot of Americans, that moment has been missing. We said it earlier, and it's worth sitting with for a second. Okay. It does feel like someone is riding in on a white horse. Now, whether you like that image or not, whether you agree with it or not, it's not really the point. The point is that it does feel that way. Because when a system stalls, whoever moves first looks like the one who stepped up. It doesn't matter how long or how complicated the situation is behind the scenes. It doesn't matter how many moving parts there are. From the outside, it comes down to one simple contrast. Nothing was happening, and then something did. And the person who made it happen gets the attention. But now, here's where this conversation gets deeper. Because this isn't just about one move, it's about what made that move necessary in the first place. Think about it. If Congress had acted, if the SAVE Act had passed cleanly, quickly, and decisively, we wouldn't even be here. Which means this moment isn't about leadership, it's about the vacuum that leadership stepped into. And that vacuum exists because the system didn't produce a result. Before this, the conversation was stuck, back and forth, point and counterpoint, blame and response. Now, the conversation is going to shift because once action is taken, everything becomes reaction. People aren't asking what should be done. They're asking, what do we think about what was done? That's a completely different place to be. And strategically, it matters. Because the person who acts first doesn't just move policy, they move the conversation. All right. We got to be real about something. This move that we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, there isn't risk free. Anytime you move this way, anytime you act decisively, visibly, quickly, you take ownership of the outcome. If it works, you get the credit. If it doesn't, you get the blame. There's no hiding behind process anymore. No pointing to committee delays. No saying, well, we tried. This is direct. And direct action always comes with direct accountability. And at the same time, doing nothing or appearing to do nothing comes with its own cost. And it's a cost that we've been watching build. Frustration turns into skepticism, skepticism into disengagement, and disengagement turns into distrust. And once people start to believe that the system won't act, they really stop expecting it to. And that's a dangerous place for any country to be. So when you step back and look at it, not as a headline, not as a political talking point, but as a moment, you start to see why this matters. Because it breaks the pattern. It interrupts a cycle of waiting. It replaces delay with movement. Whether people agree with it or not, they recognize it. And there's a reason why it resonates, because it's not just policy, it's not just politics, it's a feeling, it's a vibe. The feeling that someone is willing to step in and take responsibility, to say, this is on me. And in a time when responsibility often feels scattered, spread out across agencies and committees and departments and processes, that kind of clarity stands out. All right. Now the question becomes, what happens next? Because action is just the beginning. Execution is what determines everything. If this leads to order instead of confusion, consistency instead of randomness, confidence instead of doubt, then it strengthens the move. If it doesn't, the reaction comes just as quickly as the action did. All right, let's land this plane. At the end of the day, this moment comes down to something very simple. For a long time, people felt like nothing was moving, and now something is. And in a country that has been stuck in a loop of debate and delay that alone is enough to change how people see things. Not because everything is solved, not because every problem disappears, not because for the first time in a long time, it feels like someone decided to stop waiting and start doing. Now, whether you agree with it or not, it's a shift. It's a shift that people can see. And once people see movement, they start expecting more of it. My name is Willie Lawson. This has been the Morning Report. And until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody. And for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We'll see you when we see you. Bye bye now.